The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Adelaide Cottage as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood by the kitchen window, watching her 3 children chase their spaniel, Orla, through the frost-covered garden. The sight filled her heart with warmth, but also with a bittersweet ache that had become all too familiar over the past year. The previous months had been the most challenging of her life. The cancer diagnosis had arrived like a thunderbolt on an otherwise ordinary spring day, turning their carefully ordered world upside down. The chemotherapy treatments, the sleepless nights, the weight loss that left her clothes hanging loose, all of it had tested not just her physical strength, but the very foundation of who she was as a mother, wife, and public figure. William entered the kitchen quietly, his footsteps soft on the wooden floor. Even after all these years of marriage, he still moved with the careful consideration of someone who had learned to read the subtle shifts in her mood. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from sleep, and she noticed the new lines around his eyes, worry lines that hadn't been there a year ago. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked, his voice gentle as he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his cotton shirt. "Stronger," she replied honestly. It was true. Each day brought small improvements, tiny victories that she had learned to celebrate. Yesterday, she had managed to walk to the village shop without feeling exhausted. The day before, she had helped Charlotte with her homework without the fog of fatigue clouding her thoughts. Through the window, they watched 9-year-old George attempting to teach 7-year-old Charlotte how to properly throw a stick for Orla. 5-year-old Louis had abandoned the game entirely and was now collecting interesting stones from the garden path, his pockets bulging with his treasures. "They've been so brave," Catherine murmured, her voice catching slightly. Throughout her treatment, she had marveled at her children's resilience. They had adapted to the changes in their routine with remarkable grace, taking turns bringing her cups of tea, drawing pictures to brighten her bedside table, and somehow understanding without being told that Mummy needed extra gentle hugs. William pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "They learned from watching you," he said. "Your courage gave them permission to be brave too." The kitchen timer chimed, interrupting their quiet moment. Catherine had been experimenting with baking again, slowly rebuilding the simple pleasures that treatment had temporarily stolen from her. The smell of cinnamon and apple filled the air as she pulled a batch of muffins from the oven, not perfect, but made with love and improving with each attempt. As if summoned by the aroma, the children tumbled through the back door, bringing with them the crisp January air and rosy cheeks from their morning adventure. Louis immediately climbed onto a kitchen stool, his small hands reaching hopefully toward the cooling rack. "Can we have one now, Mummy?" Charlotte asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. Catherine noticed how her daughter had started asking permission for things that she used to simply expect, another small change that spoke to how much their family had weathered together. After breakfast, Catherine replied with a smile, ruffling Charlotte's hair. "But you can each lick the bowl if you'd like." The simple domestic scene felt precious in a way it never had before. Catherine had always valued their family time, but her illness had stripped away any tendency to take these moments for granted. Every shared meal, every bedtime story, every silly joke told over breakfast had become a gift to be savored. George, ever the responsible eldest, began setting the table without being asked. He had grown up so much over the past year, stepping into a protective role that no 9-year-old should have to assume. Catherine and William had worked hard to ensure the children could still be children, but George's natural maturity had emerged as he watched his mother fight for her health. "Dad, can we take some photos today?" George asked as he carefully placed the butter dish in the center of the table. "Mummy looks really happy this morning." Catherine felt her breath catch. Photography had always been one of her great passions, a hobby that had evolved into genuine skill over the years of documenting their family's life. But, during treatment, she had barely touched her camera. The creative spark that had always burned bright within her had dimmed to barely a flicker as she focused all her energy on healing. William caught her eye across the kitchen, raising his eyebrows in a silent question. The decision was entirely hers, and she knew he would support whatever choice she made. "You know what?" Catherine said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea." The children erupted in excited chatter. They had missed their mother's photography sessions, the way she would arrange them in natural poses, capturing candid moments of laughter and sibling affection. Her photos had always been different from the formal royal portraits, filled with warmth and genuine emotion that revealed the loving family behind the public titles. After breakfast, Catherine retrieved her camera from the study where it had sat unused for months. The familiar weight of it in her hands felt foreign at first, but, as she adjusted the settings and tested the light, muscle memory began to return. Her fingers moved more confidently across the controls, and she felt the first stirrings of creative excitement she had experienced in far too long. "Where shall we start?" William asked, noting the new energy in her posture. He had missed seeing her this way, focused and passionate, with the particular intensity she brought to things she truly cared about. "The garden," Catherine replied without hesitation. "The light is perfect, and I want to capture how beautiful everything looks with the frost." They spent the next hour moving through different areas of their private grounds. Catherine found herself seeing with fresh eyes, noticing details that might have escaped her before. The way Louis's breath created small clouds in the cold air as he chatted excitedly. The protective way George positioned himself near Charlotte when she climbed on the garden wall. The unconscious grace with which William moved as he lifted their youngest son to reach a particularly interesting icicle hanging from the greenhouse roof. "Mummy, your eyes are shining again," Charlotte observed during a quiet moment as Catherine adjusted her camera settings. The simple statement, delivered with the profound honesty that only children possess, brought tears to Catherine's eyes. "They are, aren't they?" she replied, kneeling down to Charlotte's level. Through the viewfinder, she had rediscovered not just her love of photography, but a renewed appreciation for the life she had fought so hard to preserve. As the morning progressed, Catherine found herself taking risks with her photography that she had never attempted before. Instead of the carefully composed shots she usually favored, she experimented with movement and spontaneity. She captured William mid-laugh as Louis told him an elaborate story about the stones in his pocket. She photographed the children running toward her, their faces full of joy and energy, the cottage blurred softly in the background. The creative flow felt like coming alive again after a long sleep. Each click of the shutter was an affirmation of her recovery, of her family's strength, of their shared future stretching out ahead of them like an unwritten story full of possibility. William watched his wife work with a mixture of relief and admiration. Over the past year, he had seen Catherine display courage he had never imagined possible. But, this morning, he was witnessing something different, not just survival, but a return to joy. The woman he had fallen in love with at university was fully present again, her creative spirit rekindled and burning bright. "I have an idea," Catherine announced as they headed back toward the house for lunch. "What if we don't just keep these photos for ourselves? What if we shared some of them?" The suggestion surprised even her. For months, their family had maintained privacy around her treatment, sharing only the most necessary information with the public. The idea of voluntarily opening that door, even slightly, represented a significant shift in her thinking. William studied her face carefully. "Are you sure? We don't owe anyone explanations or updates." "I know," Catherine replied, her voice growing stronger as the idea took shape. "But I keep thinking about all the letters we've received. All the families dealing with similar challenges. Maybe sharing some happiness could be a gift to them too." The concept was both simple and revolutionary. Instead of the usual formal New Year greetings released by the royal household, they could offer something personal and genuine. Photos that showed not a perfect fairy tale, but a real family that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Catherine and William sat together reviewing the day's photographs on her camera's display screen. The images were beautiful, but, more than that, they told a story. A story of resilience, of love that had deepened through difficulty, of children who had grown in wisdom and compassion. "These are extraordinary," William said softly, scrolling through shot after shot that captured moments of pure connection. "You can see everything in their faces, how much we've all grown this year." Catherine nodded, feeling a sense of completion she hadn't experienced in months. The photos weren't just documentation of a day, they were proof of healing, evidence of hope, visual testimony to the power of family love to overcome even the darkest challenges. "I want to do something special with them," she said. "Something that honors what we've been through, but also celebrates where we are now." As they discussed possibilities, both felt the excitement of a shared project taking shape. For the first time in months, they were planning something together that had nothing to do with medical appointments or treatment schedules. They were dreaming again, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Outside, snow began to fall softly, adding another layer of magic to a day that had already transformed their perspective on the year ahead. In her heart, Catherine knew that this morning had marked a turning point not just in her recovery, but in their family's journey toward whatever came next. 3 days after their impromptu photography session, Catherine found herself in the unusual position of second-guessing a decision that had felt so right in the moment. She sat in her private study, laptop open before her, scrolling through the dozens of photographs she had taken. Each image was beautiful, capturing genuine moments of family joy and connection, but the question of whether to share them publicly weighed heavily on her mind. The past year had taught her the value of privacy, the importance of protecting her family from unwanted scrutiny during their most vulnerable moments. The decision to step back from public duties during her treatment had been necessary, creating space for healing away from the constant observation that came with royal life. Now, choosing to voluntarily step back into the spotlight felt both liberating and terrifying. William entered the study carrying 2 cups of tea, a ritual they had maintained throughout her recovery. He set one beside her laptop and settled into the armchair across from her desk, noting the slight furrow in her brow that indicated deep thought. Still thinking about the photos, he asked gently, recognizing the expression she wore when wrestling with important decisions. "I am," Catherine admitted, leaning back in her chair. "Part of me knows it's the right thing to do. These pictures show us as we really are, not the polished royal image, but a family that's been through something difficult and come out stronger. But another part of me wonders if we're ready to invite that level of attention back into our lives." William nodded thoughtfully. He had been grappling with the same questions. Their period of relative privacy had been a gift, allowing them to focus entirely on Catherine's health and their family's well-being without external pressures. The thought of stepping back into the public eye, even on their own terms, required careful consideration. "What does your instinct tell you?" he asked, knowing that Catherine's intuition had rarely steered them wrong in the past. Catherine scrolled to one particular photograph, a candid shot of all 5 family members laughing together as Orla attempted to steal George's hat. The joy in the image was unmistakable, but, more than that, it radiated hope. She thought about the thousands of letters they had received during her treatment, messages from families facing similar challenges, words of encouragement from people who had never met them but felt connected to their struggle. "My instinct says that sharing joy is never wrong," she replied slowly. "Especially when that joy has been hard-won." The conversation was interrupted by sounds of activity from upstairs, the children getting ready for bed, voices calling back and forth between bedrooms, the familiar evening routine that had become even more precious over the past year. Catherine found herself listening with the heightened awareness that came from knowing how easily these ordinary moments could be threatened. "Mummy! Daddy!" Charlotte's voice carried down the stairs. "Can you come read with us?" Catherine and William exchanged a look of shared understanding. Whatever decision they made about the photographs could wait. Right now, their children needed them, and nothing was more important than that. They found all 3 children gathered in George's room, a nightly tradition that had evolved during Catherine's treatment. The older children had wanted to be close to each other and to their parents whenever possible, as if proximity could provide protection against uncertainty. Louis was already in his pajamas, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant, while Charlotte had claimed the window seat with a book about horses. "What are we reading tonight?" William asked, settling onto the edge of George's bed while Catherine curled up in the reading chair they had moved into the room months earlier. "Can we read about brave people?" Louis asked, his 5-year-old logic making connections that sometimes surprised the adults. "People who did hard things and were okay after?" Catherine felt her heart squeeze with love and pride. Even at his young age, Louis seemed to understand that stories of courage and resilience had particular meaning for their family right now. She and William had worked hard to be age-appropriately honest with their children about her illness, helping them understand that difficult things sometimes happen to people we love, but that families could face those challenges together. They spent the next hour reading stories of explorers and inventors, of ordinary people who had overcome extraordinary obstacles. As she listened to William's voice bringing the characters to life, Catherine found herself thinking about storytelling in a broader sense. Every family had a story, every struggle had the potential to become a narrative of triumph, and every moment of joy deserved to be celebrated and shared. After the children were finally settled in their own beds, Catherine and William returned to the study. The photographs were still open on her laptop screen, waiting for a decision. But something had shifted during their bedtime routine. The uncertainty Catherine had been feeling had crystallized into clarity. "I keep thinking about Louis asking for stories about brave people," she said, pulling up one of her favorite shots, William helping Charlotte climb a particularly challenging tree while George and Louis watched admiringly from below. "What if our story could be one of those stories? Not because we're royal, but because we're a family that faced something scary and found our way through it together?" William moved to stand behind her chair, his hands resting gently on her shoulders as he looked at the screen. The photograph captured a moment of pure family connection, but beyond that, it showed something universal: parents supporting their children, siblings looking out for each other, love in action despite difficult circumstances. "The response to your video announcement about completing treatment was incredible," William reminded her. "People were so grateful for your honesty, for showing them that it's possible to go through something like this and come out the other side." Catherine remembered the overwhelming response to her September video message announcing the completion of her chemotherapy. The outpouring of support had been extraordinary, but, more than that, the messages from other families had shown her how much her openness had meant to people facing similar challenges. These photos could be the next chapter of that story, she realized aloud. Not just "we survived this," but "look how much joy is possible on the other side." The decision was beginning to feel inevitable, but Catherine wanted to be absolutely certain. She had learned during her treatment to trust her instincts about what felt right for her family, and this felt right in a way that surprised her with its certainty. "There's something else," she added, scrolling to a particularly beautiful shot of the children playing in the frost-covered garden. "I want people to see that going through something difficult doesn't have to define your whole story. These photos show us being completely normal, completely happy. Maybe that's exactly what some families need to see right now." William squeezed her shoulders gently, understanding the depth of thought behind her words. They had both witnessed Catherine's transformation over the past year, not just her physical healing, but her emotional and spiritual growth. The experience had deepened her empathy, strengthened her sense of purpose, and clarified her priorities in ways that would influence the rest of her life. "How do you want to do it?" he asked, recognizing that she had moved from if to how in her thinking. Catherine had been considering this question for days. The traditional approach would be to work with the palace communications team, crafting a formal statement to accompany carefully selected images. But something about that felt too distant, too controlled for what she wanted to achieve. "I want it to feel personal," she said. "Not like a royal announcement, but like sharing pictures with friends. Maybe just a simple message about gratitude and hope, letting the photos speak for themselves." They spent the next hour going through the images together, selecting the ones that best captured the spirit of their family's current chapter. The process felt collaborative and creative in a way that reminded Catherine why she had fallen in love with photography in the first place. Each chosen image told part of their story, but together they created a narrative of resilience, love, and joy that felt both deeply personal and universally relatable. By the time they finished their selection, Catherine felt a sense of excitement that had nothing to do with royal duty and everything to do with authentic expression. For the first time in months, she was choosing to step forward rather than simply responding to circumstances beyond her control. "I want to write the message myself," she said, opening a new document on her laptop. "Not formal palace language, but my own words about what this year has taught us." William watched his wife begin to type, noting the focused energy that reminded him of her university days when she would lose herself completely in projects she cared about. The past year had been about survival and healing, but this felt like something more, a conscious choice to transform their private journey into something that might help others. The message Catherine crafted was simple but heartfelt, acknowledging the challenges of the past year while celebrating their family's current happiness. She wrote about the importance of hope, the strength found in simple moments, and the gratitude she felt for every ordinary day. The words flowed easily, carrying none of the stilted formality of official royal communications. "It's perfect," William said when she finished reading the draft aloud. "It sounds like you warm, honest, hopeful." Catherine saved the document and closed the laptop, feeling a mixture of anticipation and peace about the decision they had made. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of sharing these intimate glimpses into their family life, but tonight, she simply wanted to savor the quiet satisfaction of having found a way to turn their private healing into a gift for others. As they prepared for bed, Catherine found herself thinking about the children's reactions when they learned about the plan. George, she suspected, would understand the significance immediately. Charlotte would be excited about the pretty pictures, while Louis would probably be most interested in making sure Orla looked good in the photos. "They're going to love seeing themselves in the pictures," William observed, echoing her thoughts as they turned off the study lights. "I hope other families will love seeing them too," Catherine replied. "Not because we're royal, but because we're real." The next morning would bring new conversations with the communications team, technical discussions about timing and platforms, and all the practical considerations that came with any royal public appearance. But tonight, as Catherine drifted off to sleep, she felt nothing but gratitude for a family that had weathered every storm together and was now ready to share their rainbow with the world. The morning of the planned release dawned gray and drizzly, typical January weather that matched Catherine's suddenly nervous mood. She had slept fitfully, waking several times with second thoughts about their decision to share the family photographs. In the cold light of morning, the choice that had felt so natural and right just days before now seemed fraught with potential complications. She found William already awake in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone with a concerned expression that immediately heightened her anxiety. The children were still sleeping, giving them a rare moment of quiet before the day began. "Everything all right?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders as he set his phone aside. "Just checking the news cycle," William replied, pulling her into a reassuring embrace. "Making sure we're not releasing our photos into any major story that might overshadow them or create the wrong context." Catherine hadn't considered this practical detail, another reminder of how much planning went into even seemingly simple public communications when you were members of the royal family. The spontaneous joy of taking the photographs was now overlaid with careful strategy and timing considerations that felt foreign to her artist's heart. "Are you having second thoughts?" William asked gently, reading the uncertainty in her expression with the accuracy of someone who had known her for more than half her life. "Not exactly second thoughts," Catherine said slowly, accepting the cup of tea he offered. "More like stage fright, I suppose. It's been so long since we've chosen to put ourselves out there. What if people don't respond the way we hope? What if sharing something so personal backfires somehow?" These were legitimate concerns. The royal family's relationship with the media and public opinion was complex under the best circumstances, requiring careful navigation of competing interests and expectations. Catherine's illness had provided them with a protective buffer of privacy and goodwill, but stepping back into voluntary public attention meant accepting renewed scrutiny of their choices and actions. William sat beside her at the kitchen table, his presence steady and reassuring. "Remember why we decided to do this," he reminded her. "Not for publicity or obligation, but because we wanted to share some joy with people who have supported us through a difficult time. That intention hasn't changed." His words helped restore Catherine's perspective. The decision hadn't been about royal duty or public relations strategy. It had grown from a genuine desire to offer hope to other families facing similar challenges, to show that healing and happiness were possible even after the darkest periods. "You're right," she said, feeling some of her confidence return. "This is about connection, not performance." The sound of small feet on the stairs indicated that their quiet morning was ending. Louis appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair sticking up in every direction and his elephant tucked securely under one arm. He climbed onto Catherine's lap with the unself-conscious affection that never failed to brighten her day. "Are you going to show people our pictures today, Mummy?" he asked with 5-year-old directness, apparently having absorbed more of their recent conversations than she had realized. "We are," Catherine confirmed, smoothing down his unruly hair. "Are you excited about that?" Louis considered this seriously. "Will they see how good Orla looks?" Because she was being very photogenic. The innocent question made both parents laugh, reminding them of why they had fallen in love with these particular photographs. they captured the family as they truly were: playful, loving, occasionally ridiculous, and utterly genuine. These weren't posed royal portraits designed to project authority or status. They were snapshots of real life, filled with the kind of details that only someone who truly knew and loved them would think to include. Charlotte and George joined them for breakfast, both displaying varying degrees of excitement about the day's plan. Charlotte was primarily interested in which photographs would be shared, hoping her favorites had made the final selection. George, with his developing understanding of their public role, asked thoughtful questions about how people might react to seeing their private family moments. "Will it feel strange having everyone see pictures of us just being normal?" he wondered, demonstrating the kind of insight that sometimes surprised Catherine with its maturity. "It might feel a little strange," Catherine acknowledged honestly. "But I think it will also feel good to show people that our family has happy days and silly moments, just like everyone else's family." The conversation was interrupted by a call from the palace communications team, ready to coordinate the technical aspects of the release. Catherine found herself switching between her private identity as a mother having breakfast with her children and her public role as the Princess of Wales making strategic decisions about royal communications. The photographs they had selected told a cohesive story of family joy and resilience. There was the image of all five of them laughing as Orla attempted to steal George's hat. Another showed Catherine and William watching their children play, their faces reflecting pure contentment and gratitude. A third captured the children building a frost sculpture in the garden, their cheeks pink with cold and excitement. Each photo had been chosen not just for its technical quality, but for its emotional honesty. They showed a family that had clearly weathered difficulties but had emerged with their love and joy intact. The images radiated hope without glossing over the reality of what they had endured. "The response team is ready," William informed her after ending his call with the palace staff. "Whenever you're ready to proceed." Catherine looked around the kitchen table at her children, noting George's protective posture near Charlotte, Louis's contentment as he finished his breakfast, the easy family dynamic that had taken months to fully restore after the disruption of her treatment. This normalcy, this happiness, it was exactly what the photographs celebrated, and exactly what she hoped other families would see in them. "I'm ready," she said with growing confidence. "Let's do this." The actual process of releasing the photographs was surprisingly straightforward. Years of royal communications protocol had created efficient systems for sharing official content across various platforms simultaneously. Within minutes of Catherine's approval, the images and her accompanying message were available for the world to see. The initial response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Catherine's phone began buzzing with notifications from friends and family members who had seen the photos. The palace communications team provided regular updates on media coverage and social media reactions, all of which indicated genuine warmth and appreciation for the family's openness. "Look at this," William said, scrolling through responses on his tablet. "People are sharing their own family photos in response to ours. There's this whole conversation happening about finding joy after difficult times." Catherine leaned over to see the screen, touched by the way their simple decision to share happiness had inspired others to do the same. The comments ranged from heartfelt messages of support to excited observations about the children's growth to grateful acknowledgments from families dealing with their own health challenges. One comment in particular caught her attention: "Thank you for showing us that families can go through terrible things and still have beautiful, ordinary days together. This gives me hope for what's possible after my husband's treatment ends." "This is exactly what we hoped for," Catherine murmured, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction about their decision. The photographs weren't just being viewed as royal content or celebrity gossip. They were serving as inspiration and encouragement for real families facing real challenges. Throughout the day, the children remained largely unaware of the broader response to their photos. They went about their normal routine: lessons with their tutor, playing in the garden, helping with small household tasks. The ordinariness of their day provided a stark contrast to the extraordinary attention their family was receiving online and in the media. "It's funny," Catherine observed to William as they watched the children playing in the afternoon. "Here we are, having what feels like a perfectly normal day, while thousands of people we've never met are looking at pictures of us and feeling, what? Hope? Joy? Connection?" The phenomenon highlighted something Catherine had been thinking about throughout her recovery: the strange intimacy that existed between the royal family and the public. People who would never meet them nonetheless felt connected to their struggles and triumphs, finding personal meaning in their experiences. "I think that's the point," William replied thoughtfully. "Despite all the ways our life is different from most people's, the fundamental experiences, love, fear, hope, gratitude, are exactly the same. When we share those honestly, it creates real connection." The afternoon brought even more positive responses. Major news outlets were covering the photo release with warmth and respect, focusing on the family's obvious happiness and Catherine's visible health. Social media platforms were filled with supportive messages and shared stories from families who had found inspiration in their openness. Perhaps most meaningfully, the palace had begun receiving letters and emails from people specifically thanking them for choosing to share joy rather than simply documenting struggle. Many wrote about how the photographs had helped them envision positive outcomes for their own difficult situations. As evening approached, Catherine felt a deep sense of peace about the day's events. The nervous energy that had plagued her morning had transformed into satisfaction and gratitude. Their decision to share these intimate family moments had created exactly the kind of connection and inspiration they had hoped for. "No regrets?" William asked as they prepared dinner together, the children busy with activities in the next room. "None at all," Catherine replied without hesitation. "Actually, I feel like we've discovered something important today. There's real power in choosing to share happiness, especially when that happiness has been hard-won." The experience had clarified something for Catherine about her future approach to public life. Rather than simply fulfilling obligations or responding to external expectations, she wanted to focus on authentic communication that served a purpose beyond duty, sharing experiences that might genuinely help or inspire others. As they called the children for dinner, Catherine reflected on how much had changed since her diagnosis a year earlier. The fear and uncertainty of that time felt distant now, replaced by confidence in her family's strength and clarity about what truly mattered. The photographs they had shared weren't just documentation of their recovery, they were celebration of their resilience and declaration of their commitment to finding joy in every ordinary day. Tonight, they would have a normal family dinner, help the children with bedtime routines, and settle in for another peaceful evening together. But Catherine knew that thousands of families around the world might sleep a little more peacefully because they had chosen to share proof that happiness and hope could coexist with acknowledgement of life's challenges. That knowledge filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with public approval and everything to do with the fulfillment that came from using their unique platform to serve something larger than themselves. 2 weeks after the photo release, Catherine sat in her private sitting room reading through a stack of letters that had arrived from around the world. The response to their family photographs had exceeded every expectation, generating not just media coverage but thousands of personal messages from families who had been touched by their decision to share such intimate moments of happiness. Each letter told a story. A mother in Australia whose own cancer treatment had just ended wrote about how seeing Catherine's obvious health and joy had given her hope for her own recovery. A father in Canada described showing the photos to his young children as an example of how families could face difficulties together and emerge stronger. A grandmother in Wales thanked them for demonstrating that serious illnesses didn't have to define or destroy family happiness. "This one particularly moved me," Catherine said to William, holding up a letter written in careful childish handwriting. "It's from a 10-year-old girl whose mother is receiving chemotherapy. She says seeing our family photos helped her understand that her mummy might be happy and healthy again soon." William looked up from his own correspondence, touched by the ongoing impact of their decision. The palace staff had been managing the volume of responses, but they made sure Catherine saw the most meaningful letters, those that demonstrated how their openness had genuinely helped other families navigate similar challenges. "Have you thought about what comes next?" William asked. Throughout Catherine's treatment and recovery, they had focused entirely on the present, taking each day as it came without making long-term plans. But her obvious health and renewed energy had them both beginning to consider their future role and responsibilities. Catherine set down the letters and moved to the window, looking out at the garden where the children were playing with renewed appreciation for ordinary moments. The question William had posed was one she had been pondering for weeks. Her experience over the past year had fundamentally changed her perspective on their public role and the ways they could use their platform meaningfully. "I keep thinking about authenticity," she said slowly. "About how rare it is for public figures to share genuine vulnerability and how powerful it can be when they do. These letters prove that people are hungry for real connection, not just polished performances." The success of their photo release had demonstrated something important about modern royal communications. In an age of social media and instant global connection, traditional formal approaches felt increasingly disconnected from how people actually lived and communicated. Their decision to share personal, joyful moments had resonated precisely because it felt authentic rather than calculated. "I want our future work to build on what we've learned," Catherine continued. "Not just fulfilling traditional royal duties, but finding ways to create genuine connection and support for families facing challenges." William joined her at the window, watching George patiently teach Louis how to properly kick a football while Charlotte provided commentary from her perch on the garden wall. The scene reminded them both of the values they wanted to promote: family support, patient teaching, inclusive play, simple joy in shared activities. "The response to the photos has shown us something important," William observed. "People don't want us to pretend we're perfect or that our lives are completely separate from theirs. They want to see that we're a real family dealing with real challenges, just like everyone else." This insight was already influencing how they thought about upcoming public engagements. Rather than simply attending events and making polite conversation, they wanted to find opportunities for meaningful interaction that could genuinely support others. Catherine had been particularly interested in expanding their work with families affected by serious illness, drawing on their own recent experience to provide authentic understanding and encouragement. The conversation was interrupted by Charlotte bursting through the garden door, her cheeks flushed with excitement and cold air. "Mummy, Daddy! The postman brought another bag of letters for us. He said people from all over the world have been writing." The continuing volume of responses had surprised even the palace staff, who were accustomed to